Don't touch it. She'll get it.
Hello?
There we go.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. As a reminder, please silence your cell phones as we welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Swanville Valley. My name is Fletcher Walter, and I'm a member of the Board of Trustees. With curious intellect, how about that?
Yes, you are who?
Okay. With curious intellect and a shared unity in our respect for inclusivity, we as Unitarian Universalists are not bound to a specific creed written by one to be followed by all. We often like to say that we don't have to think alike to love alike. As a congregation, we welcome you without prejudice, accepting diversity and differences in belief, helping us to grow both individually and collectively as an engaged community in our search for the truth. At the end of the day, it's our deeds that best define our creed. If you're new to Unitarian Universalism, we invite you to take a look at our mission statement, printed on the front of the order of service, and on the back, our 8 principles that we practice and promote within this setting and throughout the community at large. It's our tradition to welcome first and second time visitors. For those of you who have not been here for a while, to stand if you're comfortable in doing so, introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. Can we start on this side?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I'm Ginny Sullivan, and I'm from Charlotte, the Unitarian University community of Charlotte.
Welcome.
Nice to have you up here.
Anybody else on this side? Well, thank you for coming today. We know there's many choices out there, and we're delighted that you decided to share your time with us this morning. If you have an interest in receiving our newsletter, learning more about who we are, or perhaps getting involved in our community, please fill out the white card located in the back of the pews or on the table outside in the foyer. They can be placed in the collection plate or again on the table out front. We also have those involved in our membership committee identified with orange name tags. At least one, Andy, thank you. Please feel free to speak with these folks, or in this case, during our coffee hour directly afterward. We end this part of the service with respect that the land that we're on today was and remains the ancestral home of the Cherokee and of other indigenous people, who through stewardship, understanding, and conservation survived and still thrive in this land. We acknowledge their enduring connection to their homeland. Let's begin our service.
Good morning. I'll light our candle to begin our service. Thank you. Thank you, Sue.
Up top, Sue. Sue. Sue.
Oh, no, this candle here, Sue. What do you do?
That's so she can reach it.
Thank you, Sue. Our opening words today are the words of Thomas Barry, a fellow North Carolinian. They're taken from his wonderful book entitled Dream of Earth. The present is not a time for desperation, but for hopeful activity. We now live not so much in a cosmos, but in a cosmogenesis. That is, a universe ever coming into being through an irreversible sequence of transformations, moving in a larger arc of its development from a lesser to a greater order of complexity, and from a lesser to a greater consciousness. We will recover our sense of wonder and our sense of the sacred only if we appreciate the universe beyond ourselves as a revelatory experience of that numinous presence from whence all things came. Indeed, the universe is the primary sacred reality. We become sacred by our participation in this more sublime dimension of our world about us. The natural world demands a response beyond scientific insight. The natural world demands a response that rises from the wild unconscious depths of the human soul. And now, we'll have our opening hymn, number 135, How Happy Are They? Please rise if you are willing and able.
I'm going to play this through first. I'm not sure if we've done it before or not.
Amen.
Our today's reading is number 458. It's reading in unison.
Closer to the
Number
mic.
458, the words of Walter Royal Jones.
You talking to the mic, please?
Just bring it
You can
closer.
Bring it up.
Lift it up and bring it up. Yeah,
There we go.
Okay.
It's close to
Our reading today is number 458, words of Walter Royal Jones, to be read in unison. Mindful of truth ever exceeding our knowledge, and community ever exceeding our practice, reverently we come together, beginning with ourselves as we are, to share the strength of integrity and the heritage of the Spirit in the unending quest for wisdom and love. Thank you. And now we have the pleasure of listening to our magnificent choir. director and a fantastic choir. As a caring congregation, we now ask those of you who would like to share your joys and concerns to come forward, and I will show you that switching the stone from one container to that of water is how we are doing it. Thank you for those who shared your joys and concerns. For those who did not, we will keep them in our hearts. Our meditation and prayer today are the words of Richard Gilbert. We pause in the holy quiet to reflect on matters of the Spirit. As citizens of a nation, as inhabitants of a planet, as participants in a cosmos, we are ourselves a universe. We are a world. We are an ecosystem, a complex of thoughts and feelings, a web of love and hates, a matrix of anxieties and aspirations. In this quiet time, we take account of our inner ecology, how we feel about the state of our lives, what we think about the life we lead. We consider well our ways and how we may amend them, how we can restore order to our chaotic lives. In these moments of reflection, we see balance. We try to harmonize our lives with the earth and those we meet upon the earth. We seek to conserve our inner resources for what lies ahead, to be good stewards of who we are and what we are, to be sensitive of what we need to have, to be, to do, to give. May we find our own internal universe in tune with the stars and suns and moons in their cosmic swirl. May we live in harmony with the inner ecology of our being. And now that we are of one mind, let us dwell in the eloquence of silence. We'll now take our offertory for this congregation. In the words of Edward Hale, I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but I still can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can do. As you know, our offerings will be put to good use. Once again, we thank Linda and our fantastic choir. We are so fortunate to have such talents that we can enjoy. We are also very fortunate in this UU congregation to have a number of members whose experience, learning, and perspectives can benefit others. One of these is Tim Perry, who has explored many avenues in his search for meaning and wholeness. His desire for honesty and truth has led him on a journey through various forms of Christianity, including the Presbyterian, Episcopal, and Roman Catholic denominations. Leaving these and wandering in the wilderness, as he put it, he ended up here among Unitarian Universalists, much to the delight of all those who have come to know him. It's a real pleasure to have Tim speak to us today. His topic is moral autonomy.
Boy, did I luck out and get a good Sunday to do this. Between the choir and the music and the potluck afterwards, if the sermon is anything short of a dumpster fire, this is going to be a good day. You might wonder what I meant by moral autonomy. It's been one of my sort of soapboxes for a long time, but then as I started preparing this, I realized it's only been a soapbox inside my own head. I haven't really talked about it that much. It's just been something I've thought about an awful lot for a good long while. So I'll try to explain, because I realize moral autonomy is not really a common phrase that you hear every day. I've just heard it so much in my head I thought it was. What I mean by it is something akin to intellectual freedom. But it's a little bit more than that. It's a little bit broader than that, because it's not just about what we think, but about how we act and how we carry out our thought processes, how we behave in the world around us, and our right to determine for ourselves what we think and how we behave and how we interact with the world around us. And I think this is an absolutely critical message for this day and this time, and one that we need to be talking about a lot more, because a lot of people have forsaken or surrendered their ability to determine what they think and how they act to other people. Voltaire wrote once, "Certainly anyone who has the power to make you believe absurdities has the power to make you commit injustices." Now that is usually misquoted just a little bit, and it says, "Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities." Same idea. But it's true. If people can get you to believe something that's not true, they can get you to act on it. And they get you to do things you would not do if you didn't believe what you believe. I think after food, water, clothing, and shelter, and the basic needs of our bodies, moral autonomy is possibly, well, certainly one of the greatest needs, possibly the greatest need that we have as individuals and as a society. And the lack of it is a source of great ill. Personally, I've watched it as a great ill personally in people's lives. Some of you know my story. I went to a Free Will Baptist Bible college in my younger days, a very fundamentalist Christian group. And there were several different ways that people responded to that environment. Some people loved it and thought it was wonderful and it was great and everything was perfect and fine there. There was another group of people, of whom I became one, who thought there was something seriously wrong with it and needed some serious reform. But by far, the least happy group of people were the people who were conflicted. The people who believed that what they were being taught was right, but they found themselves without the ability to live it. They believed all the rules were the way it should be. They just couldn't live that way. And so they went around feeling guilty and conflicted, and they were miserable people. At least the people who were like me were just ornery and on the other side, but we felt pretty good about where we were. And the lack of moral autonomy is a great ill societally as well. Most of the cruelty that is perpetrated in the world, that I've observed anyway, is done by groups. There are individuals who are shockingly good at being cruel on their own. But that's usually a handful of people. And unusual people at that. They might even be sociopaths or psychopaths or something like that. I mean, if you can willingly be cruel to somebody and not feel bad about it, there's a little something wrong with you. But somehow when we get together in groups, we can be persuaded to believe and do things that we would never do as individuals. It's shocking, the things that we can do as groups. Those of you who know a little bit about history will know exactly what I'm talking about. We've seen horrendous things done. I remember as a much younger man watching a movie called Mississippi Burning about some of the events that happened in this country and in this area based in racism. And I remember just being shocked. For one thing, that those events had happened where I live and that they'd happened not very long before. Because it seemed so foreign to me, because I didn't grow up in that. I think that having moral autonomy is crucial for us because of this tendency to be cruel. I remember one particular instance that I had never forgotten it, but I hadn't thought about it in a long time. When I was in first grade, there was a little girl whose name was Belinda, and I don't remember her last name. But I remember one day the other girls were being cruel to her. They were making fun of her, making fun of her hair and the way she dressed, and she was crying. And they just kind of surrounded her and belittled her and mocked her while she stood there and cried. And I remember how shocked I was, because I don't think I'd ever seen people behave that way before. I don't think I'd ever seen people gang up on a helpless victim for no good reason and be so cruel. And I felt like I had to do something, so I went and told the teacher. I don't remember her doing an awful lot about it, because to her it was just kids picking on kids. She saw it every day. I should have done more. I should have thrown rocks at them. I should have kicked them in the shins. Or at the very least, if I couldn't make them stop, I should have hugged Belinda and told her not to listen. If I ever see her again and recognize her, I will. But that's on the small scale. On the large scale, it gets even scarier. We live in a country where about a third of the voting populace is brainwashed. Am I not supposed to say that?
Nope.
It's the truth.
It is the truth.
I'll stand by it. Because the alternative to saying they're brainwashed is to say they're stupid or evil. And they're not. They're good people. They're people that on the average are as smart as any of us. But they've been fooled. And they've believed it. And they've been led around by the nose into some things that they would not normally do. I'm particularly baffled by conservative Christians and some of the things they have advocated and supported. I used to be one of those people. I used to know those people. They should be ashamed of the things they now support. They should be falling on their knees in repentance before the God they believe in because of the things they have advocated and supported. But they're not. At least not in any large numbers. And it's not because they're stupid, and it's not because they're evil, although you may occasionally hear me say that. It's because they've been fooled. I've often said, if I ever start the cult I've been thinking about for years, it'll actually be sort of an anti-cult, because the one dogma will be, you cannot surrender your moral autonomy to anyone. Not me, not any other leader, not even anyone you love and trust. Don't do it. Don't surrender it. It's all you've got. Hang on to it for dear life. So who is it we have to be careful about? Who is it that's trying to take our moral autonomy? Who is it that's begging and clamoring for us to surrender our thought processes to them and let them tell us how to behave? Sadly, it's almost everybody. I mean, we all know about cults, right? I've been fascinated for years by the things people will put up with when they're in a cult. I mean, there are groups that control every aspect of their members' lives. They split up families. They take children away from their parents. They split up married couples and marry them to other people if they so choose. They shun anyone who leaves. You know, kids who grow up in the group and later decide to leave are shunned. They're not even allowed to make contact with their family. Their families won't have anything to do with them because they've left the group. And some of them go even farther. Protests with funny tasting Kool-Aid. It happens. Again, these are not stupid or evil people. They're people just like us. I saw recently a documentary where a woman was telling the story of how she was told that in order to really belong to this group she had gotten herself hooked into, she was going to have to receive a tattoo of some kind, a marking. And she didn't like that idea. But they kept saying, oh no, you'll love it. It's a wonderful thing. It's a way of really identifying who you are. Well, when it came down to time to do it, she found out it wasn't a tattoo, it was a brand. They were going to use a cauterizing instrument like a surgeon might use to make a mark in her body. And she later found out, although they had explained to her what every little line in the mark meant, if you turned it sideways, it was really just the initials of the leader. And she had this burned, seared into her body, and she had done it willingly, eventually, and had encouraged other people to do it. And she said, if you don't think these people can fool you, you're exactly who they're looking for. I would say it a little differently. If you don't think you can be fooled, you're a fool waiting to happen. Because we're all susceptible to it. I encountered it myself in fundamentalist Christianity. At the Free Will Baptist Bible College, we joked and said everything that wasn't forbidden was required. It was kind of true. It really was. I remember one day in a theology class, the professor was talking about, I forget what the doctrinal issue was, but he said the Catholics approach it this way, and the Orthodox approach it this way, and the Protestants and Reformed churches approach it this way. And finally one of the students raised his hand and said, but what do we believe? Think about that. What do we believe? And the teacher, to his credit, said, I don't know what you believe, but I'll tell you what our church has historically taught. The guy was saying, tell me what to believe. You know, there's all these options. Tell me what to believe. You know, don't just give me all the choices and leave me to figure it out. Give me the answer. Is that horrifying? It is to me. There's a passage in the New Testament that was often used among fundamentalist Christians, and one of the reasons they had so many rules. And it's about an issue that happened early in Christianity, during the Roman Empire. There was a habit of a lot of the animals that were slaughtered for food were actually offered as sacrifices to the various pagan gods. So the Christians had a little bit of a problem with buying and eating that meat. Some of them said, well, you can't do that. You can't eat that meat that was sacrificed to a pagan god. I used to worship those gods. You can't do that. I certainly can't do that. And there were other people who said, oh, those gods are nothing. We worship the true and living God, and this meat is for sale, and it's good, and I'm going to eat it and give thanks to God while I do it. So there was controversy there. And so the apostle wrote and said, don't let your freedom and your knowledge be an occasion to cause your weaker brother or sister to stumble. The weaker brother or sister being the one who thought it was wrong, who was afraid to do this brave thing. Well, what ended up happening among fundamentalist Christians was you couldn't do anything because somebody thought everything was wrong. And so you couldn't do there was somebody in your congregation who thought having houseplants was wrong, so you couldn't have any houseplants. Whatever it was, anything you could think of, somebody thought it was wrong, so you weren't allowed to do it. And that's why everything that wasn't required was forbidden. And, I thought I was the only one who was saying, at some point, remember who the weaker brother and sister are, and we have to encourage them to grow up and to stop judging their brothers and sisters about everything. Now, there's a balance there. There's compassion, there's understanding, but there's also, at some point, saying, grow up, And so we ended up with this situation where the least mature people were the ones who were calling the shots, basically. And that wasn't healthy. That wasn't what was supposed to happen. And really, all religions are subject to this to a certain extent. Now, you may be thinking, well, not us. We're all about the freedom to think what we think and believe what we believe and act on it, right? For goodness sake, we're Unitarian Universalists. It's practically our only dogma that we don't have any dogma. But in my experience, we're just as susceptible to it as anybody else. It just manifests in different ways. Want an example? I might ruffle a few feathers. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Our new 8th principle. We used to have 7, right? Yeah. The first time I read and heard the 8th principle, I immediately had 3 thoughts. One is, it's way too wordy and it doesn't fit with the brevity and eloquence of the other 7. Personal opinion, you're allowed to disagree. My second thought was, it's not necessary because everything in it is already covered in the other principles. Again, personal opinion, you're allowed to disagree, I respect you if you do. My third thought was, it's inevitable. It's going to happen because nobody is going to speak out against it. Do I need to say, I told you so? Nobody would speak out against it because to speak out against it would make it seem like you were defending racism. Nobody wants to do that. Even though what you maybe really were defending was the integrity of the previous document and, anyway, it had nothing to do with defending racism, but that's the way it would be seen. I'll give you an example within our own congregation. Those of you who've been around for a few years will remember the much maligned ministerial search that went on and on and on and on. Was it 4 years? Was it more than 4 years it went on before we finally settled on asking Michael to be our minister? And one of the reasons it went on so long was because every time we did a survey of the congregation about what was important and what was not, one thing kept coming up, and that was, we want a fully credentialed UU minister. And I kept thinking, our previous minister was not a fully credentialed UU minister, and we loved him. We didn't want to see him go. Are we saying we wouldn't take him back if he was able to come back and willing? It was bizarre. I pointed this out in a congregational meeting. When I would talk to individuals, everybody would say, nah, that's not really a deal breaker. But when we did a survey, it was a deal breaker. I pointed this out in a business meeting, and one other person, I don't know who you are, but if you're here, bless your heart. One other person said with me, that's not a deal breaker. Everybody else said that's a deal breaker. So what did we do? We hired Michael, who is not a fully credentialed UU minister. And most of us are pretty darn happy with him. Do I need to say I told you so again? There's something that happens to us when we get in groups. There's something that happens when we start to try to think as a group, where we most of us let our individual opinions take a back seat. And to a certain extent, you have to do that to think as a group. Some of us think we're being rugged individuals when really we're just being ornery. Because we refuse to try to think as a group, and we insist that our opinion be followed by the group. And, but sometimes we're just being ornery. But there's a delicate balance in there, you understand, between being true to yourself, being true to your own opinions and your own thoughts and your own beliefs, and listening to those of others and hearing them and working with them and being willing to try and find some common ground. It's a delicate balance. And it's very easy to either insist on your own way or to just give up and walk away, or to give in and say, there's no point fighting. So where is that balance? But it's not just religious movements that do this. It's not just religions that try to tell you how to think and how to behave. It's governments too. I mean, turn on the news. Look at Russia. Look at North Korea. People seem to literally believe their leaders are gods. And then today, this is not 1,000 years ago. This is not a Roman emperor. This is today. They seem to literally believe that their leaders are gods. And if they don't literally believe it, they keep their mouths shut and go along with it, because there can be consequences if you don't. So either way, they're giving into it. But it's not just governments, it's political movements. The founders of this country, by and large, did not like the idea of political parties. They told you so. Look at the mess we're in. Because what political parties do is they enable us as individuals to choose this group or this group and not have to worry about all the details. Not have to hash it all out. We can just take the whole package. Well, sometimes parts of the package are wrong, or overstated, or misguided. But we feel like we can't really say that, because if we criticize our own group, then we're giving credence to the other group somehow. And that's what parties do to us. They rope us into a mindset that we may not really believe in very much. In fact, we might even mostly oppose it. When I was a kid, the Southern Democrat was still a very real thing. I remember hearing one of my grandmother's friends say, I like Ronald Reagan, I'd like to vote for him, but I just can't vote for a Republican. I wasn't raised that way. Well, she was very old and she died off pretty shortly afterwards. But when I was a young kid, there was one registered Republican in the town of Bailey, North Carolina. And we all knew who she was. in the next decade or so, that radically shifted. And I would say now there's probably one registered Democrat. And it's probably the same person. Because the party's essentially shifted. Now, that was a deliberate act on the part of the Republicans. They were trying to win over the white Southern vote. But why did the Democrats switch? Why did both parties switch? I mean, you would think that what the Democrats at the time would have done is said, oh, okay, the Republicans are coming over to our side. Great. No, they switched too. It's bizarre, but it's something about this group thinking. And it's not just the conservatives. Sorry. Okay, they happen to seem like the problem children right now. I mean, they're the ones who seem to be actively destroying the republic as hard as they can in order to stay in control. And we seem to be the ones who are trying to keep it together. But that's really just a matter of chance, honestly. I think there might be just as many of us who have surrendered our ability to think for ourselves as there are of them. I don't know. We're all susceptible to it. But it's not just political movements and not just conservative ones. Here's one I hesitate to bring up. The military. Now, I have all the respect in the world for anybody who's willing to sign up to lay their lives on the line and get shot at for my sake. But I think we all understand that part of the essential training in the military is that you have to learn how to obey orders without hesitation. To me, that's a little scary. Now, you're supposed to only obey legal orders, but here's the rub. Only a military court can determine which orders are legal and which orders are not. So unless you happen to have one in your pocket, you choose to disobey an order at your own peril, even if you believe it to be illegal, because you're probably going to have to prove it. And you're much more likely to be punished for disobeying an order than for obeying an order, regardless of whether it's legal or not. That's a little scary. Now, is it essential? Probably. Because in a situation like the ones the military often find themselves in, you have to obey orders and you have to obey them quickly. You don't have time to stop and have a committee meeting and figure out whether you ought to obey the order or not. So is it essential? Maybe. Is it horrifying? Absolutely. It's both. But it's not even just that. It's the whole of society trying to tell us how to think. If you're going to be a part of a society, you're going to have to, at least to a certain extent, get along with each other. And that's going to mean sometimes keeping your mouth shut when you'd rather not. And it's going to mean sometimes giving in to what the others want, even though you personally would rather do something different. But it's not even that. Our own natures betray us. People who study, sociologists who study different societies and how they act and how they behave and how they compare to each other, have come up with a list of 5 basic moral instincts that seem to be in operation everywhere in the world, in every culture, in every society, no matter how primitive or how advanced, how liberal or how conservative. Of course, some people find 8, some people find 10 or 11 or 12, but there's a lot of overlap, and it depends on exactly where you split the lines. But I like the 5, and I'll tell you what they are. The first one is do no harm. Everybody all over the world seems to have some principle that says don't do harm to other people, don't kill, don't murder other people, don't, you know. And as I said before, if you can just harm people and not feel a little bit bad or conflicted about it, there's probably something wrong with you. Second one is fairness or reciprocity. you know, not doing to somebody else what you wouldn't want done to you. In fact, these first two can actually be put together in the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Or in some cases, don't do unto others as you would have them not do unto you. Almost every religion and every philosophy has that in it somewhere. So there's those two things. And then a third one, almost every society has some sense of purity. There's some set of taboos. There's some set of things you just don't do. Now, the specifics can be widely different from one culture to another. Maybe it's about foods you don't eat, or things you don't say, words you don't use, or people you don't marry. It could be, you know, it could be whatever. It could be very different. But almost every culture has a sense of something that makes you impure that you have to watch out for. Now, here's where it gets scary. The last two. The fourth one is community, or loyalty to the group. It could be your family, it could be your country, it could be your political party, it could be your religion, but you're expected to be loyal to that group and to not cause a whole lot of trouble. And that instinct is there that tells us we want to be part. Why are we here today? We want to be part of a group. We want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. We desire that. It's hard to be alone. The last one is the desire to have and submit to a strong leader. It's in us all. Now, we may react against it. We may rebel against it. But it is a basic human instinct. People want to have a leader, and they want to follow that leader and believe in that leader. I'm halfway through my notes. We're going to kick it into high gear now. So how can we maintain our moral autonomy in the face of all this? In the face of practically all of society and even our own nature trying to get us to surrender it. The only real hope is to, as the bumper sticker says, question everything. Sadly, you can't really live that way. So it's impossible. It's impossible to maintain our moral autonomy at all times. As someone who's changed his mind about almost everything he ever believed, I can tell you, it's not easy to do. It's not easy to question your own beliefs because they seem like facts to you. And you don't bother to question them until you're pretty much forced to. I'll skip a few illustrations I was going to give you here because I think you all get it. It's hard to question your own beliefs. But here's a start. Here are a few things that you might ask yourself, or you might bring up in conversation, allergies, with someone else who seems to be surrendering their moral autonomy. And one of those questions you might ask yourself is, are you afraid to trust your own thoughts and perceptions? There are groups who actually teach that. You can't trust your own thought processes. You have to listen to what we tell you. Well, that's a red flag, or at least it ought to be. Have you bought into that? Have you believed that you can't trust your own thoughts? I did for a long time. As a conservative Christian, I was supposed to believe the Bible over my own observations of the world. Eventually, the two were in conflict, and I ended up siding with my own perceptions of the world. But many people don't. But you have to hold on to your own thoughts and your own perceptions because they are all you've got. If you're not going to believe your own thoughts and your own perceptions and your own ideas, why would you accept somebody else's? Why are theirs any better than yours? I'd stick with the ones that came from within my own skull if I were you. When it comes to the groups that you're part of, ask yourself, well, before I get to that, ask yourself about your beliefs. are my beliefs based in evidence and facts? And if you feel like they are, make a list of them. Pick a belief and make a list of the reasons why you believe it. And then ask yourself, are my beliefs in conflict with evidence and facts? You may have to get some help with this one. Find somebody who disagrees with you and get them to point out to you how your beliefs are in conflict with facts. And then you have to decide which of these sets of so-called facts seem the most likely. You have to make a judgment call. And you can't let anybody else do that for you. Why would you? You have to do it yourself. When it comes to your groups, you might ask yourself, how do outsiders see your group? What's it like to look at that group from the outside? How does your group see outsiders? Is their perception of outsiders really accurate? Are people who are not a part of your group really as evil as you think they are? Ask yourself, do you know any people who are outside of your group or who don't think the way you do? Or don't react or live the way you do, or don't support your beliefs? Do you really know any of those people? Many times we don't. Because it's just easier to be around people you agree with. But I think it's vital that we do know some people. And I think it's vital that we have conversations, not arguments, but conversations with them. And try to understand where they're coming from. And try to understand if we're wrong. Because we might be. I'm going to skip a little and just sum it up now. My advice to you and my advice to myself and to all of us is hold your beliefs loosely. Hold them. But hold them loosely. Be willing to surrender them. A friend of mine said his theology used to be carved in stone, but eventually it kind of fell apart and it was sort of stamped in Jell-O on a good day. Other than that, it was completely liquefied. But that's kind of where we need to be. We need to hold our beliefs and hold them dearly and hold them enough to act on them. Don't be paralyzed by your doubts. You have to act on what you believe. But at the same time, be willing to admit you might be totally wrong. And be willing to listen to the other side. But at the same time, be willing to admit they might be totally wrong. In other words, it takes a lot of work. We don't get to take the easy way out and just say, I'm going to follow this group or this person no matter what. I think they're right. I trust them. I'm just going to follow them. Don't do it. You're setting yourself up for trouble. Same theology professor I mentioned earlier said somebody came to him one day and said, I'm not sure that I have enough compassion for the people I'm supposed to feel compassion for. You know, for the poor and the sick and the hungry and the lost. And, you know, I'm just not sure I feel enough. How much should I feel? And the teacher, to his great credit, said, enough to act on it. You don't have to weep while you act, but act. You don't have to have this overwhelming burden that you have to help the poor. Just help the poor. So that's kind of that balance that we need to find. Where we can hold our beliefs, but we can question them. We can admire our leaders, but we can challenge them. We can like the congregation and the way we do things, but at the same time we can be unhappy about particular aspects of the way we do things. And we can still be nice to each other and civil to each other in the midst of that. And we can always, always, always cling to our moral autonomy. And tell your kids, and tell your friends, and tell everybody you know that they need to do the same thing. And respect them and allow them to do the same thing. And give them that grace to be able to do that and still be your friend, or your child, or your beloved, or whoever. Okay, I'm going to shut up now because it's time. Thank you.
Now you know why we are so fortunate to have Tim as a member of this congregation. His sermons are always thought-provoking and intellectually stimulating. Thank you again, Tim. Closing hymn is number 148. Let freedom span both east and west. 148. Our closing words, they come from a noted paleontologist and theologian, Teilhard de Chardin. The day will come when, after harnessing space, the winds, the tides, and gravitation, we shall harvest for God the energies of love. And on that day, for the second time in the history of the world, we shall have discovered fire. Go in peace.
Fire.